Welcome back or welcome for the first time. I'm Tom Kubistant, and during this video 200 series of how to perform at your best, we're talking about specific practical issues on maximizing yourself, no matter what your performance area is, whether it's the fine arts or sports, individual sports, team sports, or ultimate sports. There's some similarities between all of these varieties of human performance. It's been said that the longest walk in a performance is from the practice area or the rehearsal area to the performing area. So many of our games are lost in that little transition walk. Any sports psychologist, performance psychologist, or mental coach worth their salt had better know how to help their performers, athletes or performing artists, learn how to make that transition from warming up, rehearsing, to the actual performing. When I was playing tennis when I was younger, I was the prototypical practice player. My strokes looked beautiful, fluid, graceful when I was warming up, when I was practicing, but put me in a match and it was looking like I was swinging a sledgehammer. Of course, back then we didn't have any sports psychologists, but I had to learn how to make that transition from the warming up, the rehearsals, to the actual performing. Now, many of us think that the quality of our warm-ups will be indicative of the quality of our performances. That is invalid. How many times have you had a rocky or rough warm-up only to perform beautifully? Surprising. On the other side of the coin, how many times have you had just a great warm-up and rehearsal and you performed poorly or in a flat manner? This goes back to our principles, principle number 2 of the psychology of human performance that says this: all performances are separate entities unto itself and has no relationship to any other performance unless you allow it to. Understand that how you're warming up is not indicative of how you're going to perform. Too often people make this transition into the performing. They switch on at maximum effort. They do things called overstriding or overstroking, and it's outside of their optimal rhythms, so that especially the fine motor skills of touch and finesse are almost forced early on. This is because the quality of your warm-ups were not seen in a smart way. The important thing to recognize that in order to transfer yourself from the rehearsal area or the practice range or the practice arena into the performance area is a mental transition, more so than a mechanical or physical transition. You have to conscientiously learn how to relax yourself, learn how to settle into yourself, learn how to engage and immerse yourself in your concentration as you're making this transition from the practice and warm-up area to the actual performing area. Hopefully that makes sense. That means you have to give priority to that and you have to give time there. Nothing's worse than having to rush right away to the performance area. Nothing good can happen from those situations. Ed Grant, back in 1981, coined this classic phrase: in order to perform like you practice, you had better learn how to practice like you would like to perform. In order to perform like you practice, it helps for you to practice like you want to perform. That means many of your ongoing practices, not warm-up sessions to a performance, but your regular practices should include different types of simulations of how to start easing into something, how to start allowing your best selves to come out, mental, emotional, as well as physical. So pretend in your practice sessions especially at the end of practice sessions, of creating these simulations of how to open up your performance. Musicians may want to rehearse their first 16 bars and then also their first transition within the piece that they're performing. Athletes may want to rehearse their opening moves. The exception are target shooters and scout snipers. Working with them, I found out they have a phrase called the cold shot. That means their opening shot is the most important shot. Think of it as a sniper, you can't warm up into these situations. So those folks, the competitive shooters and the scout snipers, also practice in simulation their cold shot. Sometimes they would just unpack their rifles, sight it in, take a cold shot and leave, or take a break. And that is high pressure. For the most of us performers, though, we can learn how to practice well so that we put ourselves in pressurized performances, so that when we go into the pressurized performance, we've already rehearsed these things. So make sure you rehearse your openings, your first transitions, while your brain is kind of like on automatic pilot, settling yourself into the pressure. That's the stuff to do, particularly in a warm-up session before a performance. There's a time to work on mechanics and specific isolated things in your warm-up, but very soon after that, you have to make the transition into putting everything together, having mind, mechanics come all together and not emphasizing specific issues, so that you're ready to unfold. That's the time to do a little simulated opening of your performances. When I would give speeches in front of large audiences, my first 4 minutes of a speech were almost memorized verbatim of what I wanted to say, opening story, opening quotes. That's when my mind was catching up to myself in the moment, so that I was almost on automatic pilot. Once I settled into the performance, then I was able to blend with the moment a lot more and fully immerse myself in that experience. So here are a couple things to remember to help you make the transition, the transference from warming up, rehearsing before a performance, and the performance. Number one, understand that the quality of your warm-ups have no relationship to the quality of the upcoming performance. That's sometimes unfair. Sometimes you can use that to your advantage of this unfairness. If you have a really good rehearsal and warm-up when everything's coming together, shrug your shoulders, breathe, relax, and say, phew, I'm ready. I've had a good warm-up, and then go forth. If you've had a bad warm-up, remind yourself that the quality of that warm-up has nothing to do with the quality of the actual performance. So go out and surprise yourself. Sometimes saying, okay, things are still a little bit at loose ends. They'll come together during the performance. I'm not going to worry about specifics. That's principle 2. Understand that during your warm-ups, you may be working on specifics, emphasizing specific things, or specific mechanics or postures or positions or moves. That has to leave very quickly in your warm-up, because you have to make the mental transition from a warming up or practice mentality into a performing or playing mentality. In golf, they have a classic saying, are you playing golf, or are you playing golf swing? The same thing in other performance areas. You have to make the transition from the mechanics to working on specific elements to making the transition into playing and pure performing. That has to be a conscious decision. The simulations you've done over the weeks may be helpful with that as well. Understand also that once you go there to the performance area, take your time to go there. Take your time to walk or to drive there. There are some people who drive from a rehearsal studio or a playing studio. My recommendation is drive very slowly. And here's a neat little exercise to do. The day of a performance, do everything well. Feel the rhythm of cooking an omelet. Feel the rhythm of driving slowly and fluidly and precisely. Too often people rush to something, are critical about themselves through nervousness, and then say, okay, let's be positive and relax. You can't do that. The day of a performance, do everything well. During your warm-ups, you're doing specific things well. The things you're not doing well, don't worry about it. And then start combining those things. Do everything well, and that'll lead you into a more fluid opening of which your fine motor skills can emerge quicker and more completely. Hopefully that's making sense. There is a concept in performance psychology called the comfort zone. And those are two levels of it and two sides of the coin. When you're performing well, you want to settle into your comfort zone, those things you can control, those things you can do well. So you avoid the temptation of overstroking or overstriding or over swimming on that. So find and settle into your comfort zone. That's when things are comfortable. As we'll talk about in a later video, you learn how to become comfortable with the discomfort of the performance area. And that's trusting what you can control in your comfort zone. The other side of that is in a bigger picture, always going into a comfort zone does limit you. Sometimes we have to extend ourselves in our long range development outside of what is comfortable for you. And that's where the thrill goes, is the uncertainty of keeping on improving. However, back to the first side, during the actual performance, settle in to what is comfortable, familiar to you at that time. Again, a lot of this depends on you taking the mental transition time between the warm-up, between the rehearsal area and the actual performance arena. Making sure you make the mental transition from individual elements, specific, isolated mechanical things, making the transition into combining things together, mind, body, and intuition and spirit. And that's the only thing you can do, is settle in to let all of that come together. Make the time, take the time to make this mental transition where everything starts to come together. And you will find out that you will start becoming comfortable with the discomfort of the performance, and you'll start becoming a lot more efficient in your warm-ups. Hopefully this makes sense. Replay this video when you need to, when you are coming into a big performance and don't know how to go into it. Replay this video and take away some things that fit for you. May you surprise yourself in all of your performances. I shall see you next time.